Do you maybe want to even kick off with, a couple sentences, of course, about, kind of what Global Track is, what you guys are doing, goals of the company? And
Sure, yeah. So I think we touched a little bit on it in our last conversation. Global right now is very much in the very beginning stages of our entry into the medicinal psychedelic space after pivoting sort of away from the cannabis space, which is where we've made a name for ourselves in the last couple of years. But Global has always been deeply rooted in identifying and really going after new and emerging industries. So it's kind of been a no-brainer that psychedelics would be something that we would want to pursue here. But right now, a lot of our focus, time, and energy really is on developing the infrastructure within the company that's going to be required really to sustain the growth that we certainly expect to achieve here over the next several months, year and a half, so on and so forth, as we sort of really get more involved in the industry. And so really developing a very distinct brand and identity for ourselves is kind of our focus, and really just emerging as a real advocate and an ally within the space. I think at a time right now, we all see the momentum that medicinal psychedelics is really picking up here. And it's so important for that momentum to continue. So we believe it's our responsibility as well in getting into this space that we are actually advocates for it, and that we play a role in helping to keep that momentum going forward so that psychedelics can get to a point where we can evolve it into a legitimate industry. So that really is a lot of our focus here, and obviously using our platforms that we've created, our Psychedelic Spotlight, our Microdose Monthly, and using those platforms to really become a voice in the space and help share information and news and help people understand that are maybe starting to pay more attention to this space right now, what's going on here, how all the news that they see out there kind of ties into the bigger picture of the evolution of the industry. It's obviously an exciting time to be here, and we're very much excited about what our own initiatives are going forward here in terms of our growth within the space.
yeah, no, and I think that's awesome. Obviously, positioning for growth, I think across the board, everybody, even listening to this can probably see, there's going to be a future with psychedelics in some way. And, I think it's great. Obviously, you guys are positioning yourself for whatever that future might be. You're going to get involved in the space. I think the nice part about, telling people stories is you get to hear a lot of stories. You get to hear a lot of angles. You get to
Mhm.
decide, hey, who do we want to work with? How do we want to work with them? And I think that's fantastic. So I guess taking it to the next level, do you want to maybe talk a little bit about how your companies differ from maybe some other companies in the space? I guess to give a little taste, I'd love to chat maybe about how you plan for Global Track to be different and Psychedelic Spotlight to be different as a website. But I'd also love maybe to chat about, what makes you guys different from some of the other companies that are coming into the space, that are doing, there looks like they're just trying to capitalize on a trend. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Right, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. You got a lot of companies really trying to get involved in this space right now. I think just for the sake of becoming involved in something where there's a lot of buzz and a lot of excitement around, and for obvious reasons. But I think as we really touched on in our last conversation, we have a real level of passion and commitment here to really seeing this industry evolve and grow, and for a couple of different reasons. I think first and foremost, we certainly recognize the opportunity that medicinal psychedelics have to completely revolutionize mental health treatment, which is something that would be huge on a global scale, really. When you look at the millions of people across the globe that suffer from things such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, and addiction, and the lives that are taken every year because of it, and the potential that medicinal psychedelics have to really just completely change that in a way that conventional drugs just have not been able to here recently. So when you look at that, that's obviously something that's very important to us. And on the business side of things, I think there's a ton of potential here. And in terms of how this industry is going to evolve into an actual industry. So I think you look at the cannabis space and that industry and its evolution over the last several years to where it is today, a thriving industry with a ton of different opportunities and ton of different sectors built within it. But that's something that didn't happen overnight. And it was sort of an evolution over time. And I think really going back to my last venture while working with Trac, where our objective there was in the cannabis space, but it was really to try and solve the banking and payment processing challenges that businesses within that space were really struggling with. And as we got into that space, I think the thing that kind of really surprised us was the network that we started to develop. And that really happened sort of organically as we started to connect with a bunch of different individuals and leaders and companies within that space. And unbeknownst to us, we were really creating this network kind of behind the scenes, made up of the industry's top leaders and certainly movers and shakers. And then getting to a point where we had a very unique opportunity to then sort of analyze it all and see, okay, you have this one company here that's got this piece of technology, but they're missing this piece. But we've met this other company that has this other piece of technology, and playing sort of matchmaker in a sense and bringing the two together really for the betterment of the industry itself. And so I think going into this, our foray here into psychedelics, I think that's the mindset that we're taking into it as well, in creating a network and recognizing the value in that network and being able to connect the leaders and the different companies that are going to be involved in this space. And I think you have to have an understanding of the big picture and where we're trying to go here in order to effectively connect the dots. And so that's something I think that's really going to separate us, because I think over time, as we really move forward here into this space, we are going to come across and meet a lot of different people. But it's not just meeting them, it's understanding who they are, what role they play, and how can they possibly collaborate with maybe somebody else that we've met in this space. Again, with keeping in mind the bigger picture and really helping the industry move forward. So I think that's going to be a very unique aspect that we're going to bring.
Yeah, and I mean, to give people some taste about what you're talking about, even you look at crypto, you look at cannabis before this, the websites or even just the people that companies went to obviously became extremely powerful but influential, and a huge benefit to the industry as a whole. Like you said, you find one person who needs something but doesn't have one thing, and you find someone else who needs something different but has what that company's looking for. And like you said, you really become the matchmaker in the industry, and it's great having all these people in your network makes you that much stronger as well. And obviously you get involved in a bunch of different things, you see what's coming, you can definitely put together cool reports, you're working with companies, and it's awesome. And a lot of these companies, both in crypto and cannabis, blew up into very successful companies, websites. They started out as pushing out news, pushing out just general information, and they built it into something crazy. So I think that's awesome. You're leading into some of the other questions I have, which are more, industry related, which, your outlook on the psychedelic space. The first question I'll ask you, what do you think needs to happen to mature the space a little bit? Obviously, it's following some similar paths as cannabis, which arguably is good. It's making at least the conversation easier. But what do you think needs to happen in the space to get it to the next level?
So I think we've seen obviously a lot of momentum really pick up here. And I think to me, the most important thing, certainly the most encouraging thing here, I think is for the first time perhaps ever, medicinal psychedelics have a path and an actual legitimate road to becoming an industry. And I think a lot of what kind of set this into motion most recently, we've seen kind of unfold in the last couple of years. The FDA, for example, granting breakthrough therapy designation to a few different companies that are involved in the research and the development of various psychedelic drugs has been a huge step forward for helping to really get things going here within this space. So that is something that, like I said, has been very, very important. I think it's, in some ways that led to the decriminalization of psilocybin here in a few different states, or a few different cities, I should say. The state of Oregon, as a matter of fact, just last week, placed on the ballot for this November an initiative. It's IP34, that's the specific initiative, where it is going to allow voters there in Oregon this November to potentially greenlight the use of psilocybin treatment for things such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, and addiction. This is a huge breakthrough for the industry itself right now. So I think things like that are really important, because that's really what's helping things move forward in terms of the momentum that we're seeing play out here. And I think the reform side of it is very, very important, ensuring that it stays on this path here to getting to where we want it to go. So I just think all those things that you see starting to come together, all the different companies that are now starting to get involved, and really the motivation that you have from a lot of different leaders within this space that are determined to really pull psychedelics out of the shadows. I think so long as that motivation stays strong and that determination is there, I think we're eventually going to get where we want to go here very soon.
Yeah, I think you touched on a part of the industry that maybe wasn't as obvious as what I thought you were going to say. And I'll say it towards the end, but you touch on the regulatory side. You touch on the fact that a lot of these people are already warmed up to it because of cannabis or whatever's happened. They're willing to, of course, decriminalize it, but also look at it from a research standpoint, from a obviously a health standpoint. I thought you were going to mention, the best way to further the space is to add more science to the space, more clinical trials, more proof, obviously actually getting more experience. But you touched on a different area, which I thought was interesting. Do you want to touch on, unless you want me to, more of the science part, the clinical stuff, and what that means for the space?
Well, I mean, the research and development side is incredibly huge, but I think you have to understand in order for that to really move forward, the red tape has to be taken off. And I think that's where we're still at right now, where we're still sort of peeling back the red tape in a lot of different aspects of the research and the development. There's no question about the fact that that's understanding and gaining a much more significant understanding of the benefits of psychedelics and how they are going to be utilized as treatments and drugs within clinical sessions is very, very important to the movement and how we're really starting to evolve this industry right now. So yeah, there's no doubt about the fact that that's a very important aspect of it. But again, I think you got to look at it from the perspective where even though that stigma now is sort of slowly starting to be removed from it, it's still there. And until it's fully removed, I don't think the industry is ever really going to be able to take that significant leap forward to really becoming what it has the true potential of becoming.
Yeah, no, and you're right. Obviously, I think it's kind of a chicken and egg thing too. One helps the other. Especially, I know here in Canada, University of Victoria is very open in saying that they are doing clinicals for psychedelics, for a bunch of other things as well. But Canada is pretty progressive. In that case, obviously, kind of the first place that cannabis became decriminalized and obviously legal, and I think that's pushing a lot of other places in the world as well as different states forward. So I think that was a fantastic answer, is kind of talking about, well, look, we got to warm these people up to the fact where they're at least trying it, in clinics and other like places. So I think that was awesome. I
Right,
kind of wanted to talk as well. I think we covered that great. That was an amazing answer. Is chatting about where do you see the space in 5 to 10 years? It's kind of the next level. So we chatted, obviously maturing is going to take years. It's not a day process, but do you want to chat on maybe where you see things in 5 to 10 years from now?
Sure. I mean, there's obviously a lot of information floating around out there about where this industry could be in 5 or 10 years. Some of it is highly speculative, but I think what I really want to touch on is what's really encouraging to me and what really excites me about the real potential here is you look at the cannabis space, and I keep going back to cannabis because it's really the most recent industry that we sort of have seen and witnessed evolve before our own eyes here. So when you look at the cannabis space, in the very beginning, when you had a lot of people starting to take a look at that industry, when it was starting to boom, there was a gravitation towards really only focusing on the cultivation side of the product as well as the dispensary side of it, and which is two very important components. You need to be able to develop your product and then somewhere to sell it. But I think what kind of got overlooked in some ways within that was all of the different areas and ancillary services, so to speak, that were going to pop up within that industry, which has just created a multitude of opportunities within that space. And I think what really hit me and really hit home was at the MJ BizCon, which is the marijuana business convention here in Las Vegas, which I've attended the last few years. And I attended this past November. And I think what really struck me was just being there on the convention floor and seeing how the convention had grown exponentially over the last couple of years, and just seeing, as far as the eye could see, the different booths made up of companies offering so many different services, solutions, technologies, products, things that you would have never imagined 5 or 10 years ago that would ever even be involved in cannabis. And so I think where that's relevant is I think we have a very similar opportunity to see the same sort of evolution here in the psychedelic space, which is going to create a ton of different opportunities from a business perspective that I think here today we can't even fully wrap our heads around. And I think that's the exciting part about this right now, is that we have the opportunity to really develop an entirely new industry and infuse it with business services and other opportunities that are going to create sort of their own path along the way. And so that really is where I kind of see this evolving now. You know, the path to getting there, like I said earlier, there's still challenges and roadblocks and hurdles that have to be taken care of, but I think that's going to happen. You look at cannabis, obviously they've gone through their own growing pains over the years in terms of having to navigate the murky waters of reform and regulation and compliance. We're going to see the same thing here in psychedelics. There's no question about that. But again, I feel like there's enough motivation, enough determination here to see this thing through and to get medicinal psychedelics into the end zone, so to speak. And so I'm excited because, again, I feel like you have unlimited potential here with where this industry can go. But again, it's a progression, and it's not something we're going to wake up tomorrow morning and find ourselves in a fully thriving industry. It's just not going to happen. But I'm very, very encouraged by the progress that's being made, and I really see that progress being continued to made here over the next several months, years, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think the general outlook, and some people are looking at psychedelics as, oh, is this going to be something I can buy in a dispensary? I don't know if it's taking the same approach as cannabis did personally.
Right.
Hey, some people are saying that. Honestly, maybe in way down the line with other things, possibly.
Right. Yeah,
To me,
yeah, possibly.
I think the angle is the same as one you're talking about, is the medical use. To me, it's how do you get addiction clinics on board? How do you get
Right.
people that want to, of course, like you said, cure PTSD, some depression stuff, things like that. How do you get it more into the mainstream? And to me, that's what's going to take 10 years is, of course, you got to get over the hump like CBD is doing right now. Instead of people just thinking, oh, marijuana, now it's thinking, oh, CBD can really help me. I wasn't a big marijuana person, but oh, CBD is interesting. It's helping me with this. And I think there will be a quick, not a quick, but a learning curve there for sure, where people are going to have to get over, the fact that it's seen as doing magic mushrooms in your backyard, and space will grow. And I think that's perfect. And hey, the addiction, kind of industry itself is a $30 billion a year industry in the U.S.
Well, absolutely, and certainly one thing that I wanted to touch on too is we look at addiction and you look at depression, which obviously are two components that are linked to psychedelics in terms of their ability to effectively treat them, and quite perhaps treat them more effectively than conventional drugs that have been used for the better part of the last several decades. But if we only look at depression here and you look at the antidepressant drug industry today, it is worth close to $14 billion. And so I think you can really start to formulate how and where monetization opportunities exist here in medicinal psychedelics, is if we can get them to a point where we can get them on a level playing field with the pharmaceutical industry. There is no doubt in my mind that they have the potential to not only just put a dent in that pharmaceutical industry, but really capture a very significant share of that market. And again, right there, we're only talking about antidepressants. We're not touching on anxiety, drugs used for anxiety and PTSD. So again, I just feel as if there's plenty of encouraging information and facts out there that so long as we keep this momentum going forward and we get medicinal psychedelics into a place where they can be on a level playing field, I think it's game on.